It is wonderful to be here with you, those of you who are the Catholic healthcare professionals. You are on the front lines today of the culture of life and the battle between the culture of life and the culture of death. It was due to many of you that we were able to have success in at least the last legislative session in terms of assisted suicide. It was your testimony and your witness to life that helped change the hearts of a few people. That does not mean that the battle is over, because all of us know that that battle will continue, especially with what has happened in California with assisted suicide. St. Paul speaks of that battle in his own times, which we can apply to our times. He reminds us of the battle between life and death. He reminds us that the concern of the flesh, or the concern of those who embrace a culture of death, is hostility toward God, that it does not submit to the law of God. And he reminds the Christians of Rome and reminds us today that we are to be those who are in the Spirit. You are in the Spirit if the Spirit of God dwells in you. And because of that Spirit dwelling within you, you belong to life and the Spirit of life. And we are called to give testimony to that. It is not just the responsibility of bishops or priests or religious to give that witness to life, but more importantly is the witness of the laity, of those who are day in and day out in the public square. It is only when the laity give witness to that that is reinforced and a culture of life is built up in society. And as Catholic healthcare professionals, you are called to be those who give that witness. Pope Francis, referring to our times in a talk that he gave to healthcare professionals and doctors in this last November, almost a year ago, stated, "The dominant thinking sometimes suggests a false compassion, that which believes that it is helpful to women to promote abortion, an act of dignity to obtain euthanasia, scientific breakthrough to produce a child, and to consider it to be a right rather than a gift to welcome, or to use human lives as guinea pigs, presumably to save others. But rather, the gospel of life and the compassion of the gospel," he says, "belongs to the parable of the Good Samaritan, of the compassion of the Good Samaritan, to save the life of another, to give witness to life. And it is fidelity," he goes on to say, "to the gospel of life and respect for life as a gift from God that sometimes requires choices that are courageous and go against the current." And with that, he also mentions the importance of conscientious objection, of being those who cannot act or do what the state tells us to do because it violates our conscience. In that, we are called then to be those who are faithful, and faithful even in the midst of suffering. The question that is raised in today's gospel from the Gospel of Luke is a question around suffering. And remember that at the times of Jesus, that people understood suffering as being the consequences of sin, that if one suffered, then one was sinful. And Jesus points to the truth that that is not what suffering is always about. That people, in the example that is given, or in the question that is given by the Galileans, in terms of blood being mixed, Pilate's blood offered to false gods, and the sacrifice of the Jews, that there is no real sin that is present there. Suffering, yes, but sin, no. Or the tower that fell on people, or the 18 people who were killed. The Jewish people understood that at times as being a consequence of sin or a punishment. And yet the Lord points to the fact that it's a natural disaster, something like we see in Patricia and all the concern around that hurricane that just hit in Mexico. There is no sin involved. And in that, it is important that what the Lord calls us to is faithfulness to him. If you do not repent, you will perish as they did. And so there is that call to conversion that the Lord gives to us, that call to a change of heart. And all of us are called to that consistently. That conversion is not just once in a lifetime, but rather it is an ongoing conversion that all of us are called to, that we are to, in our journey to the Lord, that he is constantly helping us to embrace a culture of life, constantly helping us to die to ourselves so that Christ may live within us, constantly calling us into deeper intimacy and union with him. And so as we continue with our celebration of the Eucharist this morning, and especially during this conference, I encourage you, my brothers and sisters, to first of all reflect upon the culture of life to which we are called. The spiritual battle that we are in is a real and true battle between good and evil. And we are called to be those people who embrace the good, who choose life. And all of us can be influenced by the times and society in which we live and the culture in which we live. And so I encourage you to search your own hearts as to where you have been influenced by the culture of death, and asking the Lord to purify that as you receive the Eucharist, asking the Lord to help you to more fully embrace the culture of life, and to be those who receive and pray for the Spirit of life to dwell in your heart and soul. Secondly, if there is any fear in your hearts in giving witness to the culture of life, pray for the grace of fortitude. Pray for the grace of charity as you receive the Eucharist. St. John tells us, perfect love casts out all fear. And so it is that desire to grow more in love with Jesus, to trust in Jesus and his love for me, for us, and opening our hearts to that and receiving that love. Because it is precisely that love that even in the midst of rejection, even in the midst of being persecuted for our faith, even in the midst of facing the cross today, that we are able to proclaim life, no matter what the cost. And all of us are called to that. And so pray for those graces of charity, of fortitude, that the Spirit has already placed in your hearts. All of you received them on the day that you were baptized, on the day that you were confirmed. But desire those graces and open your hearts to them, to receive them in a deeper and fuller way. And may we be those people who live according to the Spirit of life. May we be those people who embrace the Spirit and live as St. Paul, as Jesus has called us to. That, as Paul reminds us, if the Spirit of the one who raised Jesus from the dead dwells in you, the one who raised Christ from the dead will give life to your mortal bodies also, through his Spirit that dwells in you.